Good morning. This is Horizon's Middle East and Africa. Our top stories this morning. The risk-off mood continues. Global stocks and futures bear some losses after suffering their steepest slump in nearly a month on concerns of elevated valuations. Treasuries, gold and the yen rally in a bid to safety. Historic victory. Zohran Mamdani wins the New York mayoral race with more than 50% of the vote, according to AP. When sworn in on January the 1st, he will be the youngest person to hold the office in a century and New York's first Muslim and South Asian mayor.
New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change.
Plus, we are live on the trading floor at ADNOC Global Trading in Abu Dhabi. I'll be speaking to the CEO, Ahmad bin Thalith, very shortly to discuss the global trading environment. Well, it's just gone 9 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Abu Dhabi at the ADNOC Global Trading Floor, which is a joint venture between ADNOC, Eni, and OMV to trade refined petroleum products globally. We're going to pick up the conversation around some of the work that they've been doing over the last 5 years. Before we get to that, though, let us take a check on some of these markets, because what a drawdown we've had over the last 24 hours. Risk off is the theme. A lot of these major assets, we're seeing some capitulation go through. This morning, S&P futures down 0.2%. It was not a pretty day yesterday. Take a look at the handover from Asia Pacific, down 1.3% for that index, with some major declines going through. On the Nikkei down 3%, the Korean Kospi index also down 3%, as investors start doubting really the longevity of the boom that we've seen in some of these AI stocks. SoftBank, for example, in Japan, down almost 15% this morning. So a real pullback in some of those names that had been leading the gains in the run-up in the last couple of months. Also, take a look at where 10-year U.S. Treasuries are trading, 4.07. Because of this risk-off mood, we've seen some money go back in again, but note that we're still above the 4% mark. And then, of course, oil. This is where Brent is trading $64, 64.4, falling for a second day in a row after reports yesterday indicated the biggest increase in U.S. inventories in more than 3 months. And one other thing that I do want to mark before we just move on to the terminal chart today is technically now, because it is midnight in New York, the U.S. government shutdown has set its record for the longest ever at 36 days. So while all of this has been going on, remember, there's also a U.S. government shutdown. It is the longest in history now, technically, that just happened in the last few minutes. Switching over, one other asset class, keeping a close eye on, crypto, seeing a pullback. Bitcoin briefly trading through $100,000 to the downside. So a huge amount of liquidation going through in that space as well. And what you're seeing this morning is broad risk off everywhere. All of these assets that have done well the last couple of months, so the cyclicals, the growth names, the AI names, the cryptos, the golds, everything is coming off this morning. That is the backdrop. Okay, we are broadcasting live today from the trading floor of ADNOC Global Trading. Really have to say, joining us now is the CEO, Ahmad bin Thalith. Really good to be chatting to you. Really good to be here on your trading floor with all the traders around you. I want to start off just by asking you about the evolution of ADNOC Global Trading, because you launched in December 2020. How has it evolved since then, and where does it fit into the broader ADNOC picture?
First of all, thank you for having me, and welcome to the trading floor within ADNOC Global Trading. Before 2020, ADNOC decided to add a new dimension to its activities by tapping into the trading space. This will add more value to ADNOC. We used to sell all of our products 100% in an FOB basis. So all the value after the port goes back to the traders. Today, we're doing only 5% FOB, and the rest, we deliver it all the way to our end buyers across all continents. In only 5 years, we established offices in Singapore, in Geneva, and soon to come in the US.
Yeah.
This will put us on the global map, and this will increase our footprint across the whole globe.
What is the edge you think you have?
We own the full value chain, from the well all the way to the distribution. And trading comes in and takes advantage of the whole operational excellence that we have within ADNOC.
Yeah. What are the products that you're primarily trading? I understand it's refined products. So just walk us through the universe of products you're trading, and perhaps if you're looking to add to that in coming years as well.
We started with 5 products at the beginning. Today we have more than 16. So we started with the legacy products out of the refinery, jet fuel, naphtha, gas oil, gasoline, and crude. And then we started to add more products, and products that also concentrate on the new dimension of energy need. So we have LNG. LNG, for example, we trade today 3 times what we produce in ADNOC. So we're preparing ourselves for the future.
Yeah.
Biofuel, carbon, sulfur, all these products have been added to the trading floor.
And you see scope for those products just to pick up in terms of trade and volumes in coming years.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because once we surpass the uncertainty we have in the near term, we look at the future and we see the demand picking up, and
Yeah.
this is why we're preparing ourselves.
And what are the types of customers that you're dealing with?
It's mainly end buyers, okay, retailers, refiners, so we deal with them across the globe.
Yeah. Let me ask you about just more broadly, when you think about your geographical expansion plans, why it makes sense to have, obviously you mentioned that you have your base here, you're looking to expand into Europe, the US as well. How does that aid your business in terms of a 24-hour cycle?
The best thing about trading is you need to have a view over the whole globe, because the value comes out of optimization. And if one region is out of your scope, you're not 100% optimizing. So that's why we have a presence in Singapore, in Geneva, and soon to come to the US, and we optimize the barrels between all the continents.
Yeah. And in terms of I just wonder whether also ADNOC Global Trading is perceived to be almost an internal consultant of sorts, because you have your traders here and they have visibility views on where some of these key indicators markets are going to be going in the future. Is there often a conversation that takes place between ADNOC Global Trading and other ADNOC units about timing or sizing trades?
That's a very good point. Today we have an entity that has a view in the market,
Yeah.
and it will help the rest of ADNOC companies to look at their project, at their expansions, and how we look at the market. Rather than just getting data from consultants, we have people who deal with this day in and day out. So they will give you a most accurate information for your projects.
Yeah. What would you say has been your biggest challenge in terms of building this up? Because it seems like you've come a very long way in the last 5 years. You've added a lot of products. Obviously, transaction volumes have gone up too. What has been your biggest challenge in terms of getting it up and running?
We started this company during COVID.
Yeah.
So that was one of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges. So we went live in December 2020 after going all through the lockdowns and the headache of getting people in the country. But I think the biggest challenge is when we started, we had 0 UAE nationals in this business. So what we decided to do is to create a trading academy that helps those UAE nationals to bring up their skills and be part of this organization. And I'm proudly saying today that 1/3 of the population are UAE nationals. Actually, 1/3 of the traders
Yeah.
in ADNOC Global Traders are UAE nationals, doing the same business as the expats that we have in the floor.
Yeah, it's an impressive figure from where you were. In terms of transaction volumes, what are we looking at right now? And do you have a goal for where you want to get to?
We need to expand. Our international offices will help us in this organic growth.
Yeah.
Today, we transact more volume and we do more transactions per day than we used to do before 2020 in a whole year.
Yeah.
So it tells you the amount of work we have done and the amount of volume we're dealing with. And we're not relying only in ADNOC barrels. So we're doing third-party barrels, and we're increasing that portfolio.
Yeah, final questions I've got to ask you. Is AI changing the game for your traders as well? I mean, back in my day in trading, this was a very long time ago, that there was basic machine learning. But I'm curious to see how that has evolved over the years and whether actually it contributes to more efficiency in trading as well.
I think you heard Dr. Sultan 2 days ago, and he said, we are implementing AI from the well all the way to the trading. And he mentioned trading. More than 200 uses of AI across all of ADNOC, and we are part of this organization. We are focusing on data crunching, quick decisions, and risk management. And this will help us be quick to the market and handle all the volatility that comes out of this uncertain markets and situations.
Yeah, well, volatility is good for traders, they say.
Exactly.
Ahmad bin Thalith, thank you so much. Really good to be here on your trading floor and to chat to you as well.
Thank you so much.
ADNOC Global Trading CEO there. Well, coming up, a stunning upset. Zohran Mamdani wins the New York mayoral race, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo. All the latest details next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Johanna Bersachi in Abu Dhabi. Now, Zohran Mamdani has been elected the mayor of New York in a historic victory. It puts a democratic socialist in charge of the city that serves as the capital of global finance.
New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. A mandate for a new kind of politics. A mandate for a city we can afford. And a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that. The future is in our hands. My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few.
Bloomberg's Julie Fine joins us now from New York. Well, it has been quite a tremendous night of victories for Democrats. Maybe let's just start with Mamdani. A stunning ascendancy to national politics. Now the hard work starts, actually, for this new mayor for New York City. What are some of the challenges he's going to be facing?
Well, some of the challenges he is going to be facing is he's made a lot of promises. He's said things like free busing. He's made promises to the people that will require others to get on board with. So he will now have to work with the legislature, and he will also, if he wants federal extra funding for certain projects, will now be working with the president, who they already have an extremely contentious relationship.
And it wasn't just Mamdani. We saw triumphs in Virginia. We saw them in New Jersey. Proposition 50 passed in California as well. How should this be read? Is it a repudiation of President Trump's policies, or is it a reflection of the Democrats are gaining momentum now?
I think you can look at it as a little bit of both. The Democrat was expected to win in Virginia. In New Jersey, the race was expected to be a little bit closer, but Mikey Sherrill really won with a much larger margin than expected. As for Prop 50, that was a gamble for California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has presidential aspirations for 2028. But the voters really got on board with that, saying, you know, if other states are going to redistrict, which could tilt things in the Republicans' favor, we are going to do it as well. So overall, it was a very big night for Democrats. But one issue they will have to contend with are the policies of Zohran Mamdani, who comes right out and says that he is a democratic socialist. Many Democratic candidates will face questions about whether or not they agree with him, and many will be looking for that moderate voter come the midterm elections.
Yeah, still some time away for that. How much did the government shutdown get factored in to what happened in the last 24 hours? You know, this morning we walked in to the news that this has been the longest government shutdown on record. obviously has impacted the public in terms of this feeling of disillusionment. Would that have contributed at all to the Democrats' success?
We'll find that out in the days to come when they're able to look at certain exit polling and see where voters really stood when it came to actually casting their ballots. But like you just said, right now, the shutdown becomes the longest in history. This is coming at a point where people are beginning to lose their benefits. And now you have the holiday travel season upon us for the Thanksgiving holiday. Those are things that all will affect voters moving forward. Those are things that people can tangibly feel as this shutdown continues.
Bloomberg's Julie Fine in New York, thank you so much, and what has been a very exciting evening for New Yorkers. Now, the risk-off mood in stocks continues, with investors fleeing to the safety of havens as concerns of elevated valuations mount. For more on what's moving markets, Paul Dobson, our executive editor for Asian Markets, joins us now. Paul, really stunning moves overnight. I mean, you look at the likes of SoftBank down 15%, possibly even more. The Nikkei down 3%. What exactly is the catalyst for this major drawdown that we're seeing in global markets today?
Hi, good morning, Jemana. Well, the problem really is that there isn't one discernible catalyst. It's a combination or accumulation of all of those different reasons that people have been worried, all coming together. I guess if you were looking for a spark, then you could say that maybe it was once we got those earnings from Palantir, one of the companies that's really been in the vanguard, you know, of the AI boom. And it reported its earnings and all looked good, and yet it didn't manage to continue to extend the gains after hours at the end of the day on Monday. It came back off again. Then we learned that Michael Burry, you know, from the Big Short fame from back then, had bought a load of put options, basically was betting that the price of the company would go down because it's been on this huge tear, right? And so some sort of a correction, some sort of a payback was due. And all of a sudden people started to think, well, just a second, you know, for quite a long time already we've been worried about valuations, particularly for the tech companies. Quite a few days we've been seeing only the tech companies and a few hangers-on kind of rising with a lot of the rest of the market down. People very worried about that breadth element as well. And in the background, people are worried about this shutdown and what that does to the economy and the fact that the Federal Reserve is not definitely going to cut interest rates in December. All of these doubts start to come together, and that's really sort of led to this downdraft that we're seeing. Now, the question is, does it extend? There's a lot of dip buyers out there. Even in the Asia session today, we've seen the market bounce off the lows. So it's unclear if it's going to be a long-run thing or just one more of those little blips and everybody comes back in and buys that dip.
Yeah, and I guess we have to keep an eye on what the recent winners were and whether it's sort of last in, first out a situation where, you know, you're looking at the price action in Bitcoin today, also coming off. Gold has been steadily coming off over the last couple of weeks. And whether it's a case of the most recent winners in financial assets being the ones that are going to get hit the most in the coming days.
It's true, and those would be the flighty ones, but actually the story that we're picking up from the crypto world isn't so much that. There's a lot of the long-term holders of Bitcoin that have been in it for a good long ride are taking down their positions at the moment. So it's not just flighty retail investors and that sort of very up and down, blippy kind of in and out sort of a trading dynamic. At the moment, we're seeing more of the holders that have been in there for the long run lightening up their positions. So Bitcoin moved temporarily below 100,000, although that also has found a little bit more stability recently. I think in the tech space, it's a little bit more along the lines of what you said, the biggest gainers. So I was very excited about the Korea's Kospi on Monday. Just, you know, got to the top of the equity rankings. A lot of tech companies within that. It seemed like there was nothing stopping it. And of course, you know, had a pretty big comeuppance today with a drop of as much as 5% and then some intraday. So it is that kind of thing where, you know, those companies that really do have the stretch valuations or those markets that really have the hugest enthusiasm are taking the biggest blow to the chin. But you kind of expect that, right? And they have more volatility. And so, you know, it doesn't really tell us a great deal about the longer term outlook or the confidence in the market.
Well, trading, if anything, is very humbling. Paul Dobson, our executive editor for Asian Markets, running us through some of the price action overnight. It is a risk-off day. Well, coming up, we hear from Gunvor CEO Torbjörn Törnqvist on the energy traders' agreement to buy Lukoil's international assets just a week after the Russian oil producer was hit by U.S. sanctions. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Johanna Bersachi on the ADNOC Global Trading Floor here in Abu Dhabi. Well, Gunvor Group CEO Torbjörn Törnqvist says a deal to acquire the international assets of Lukoil represents a clean break for the portfolio. Speaking to me at ADIPEC, Törnqvist says he believes any concerns the authorities might have about continued Russian influence over the portfolio would be satisfied.
I can't go into the detail, but it is obviously we are assuring them that this is not the case, and it's a clean break. The moment the deal is done, that's it. We will do that, and we will be in a fully transparent dialogue with the U.S. authorities and other relevant authorities about this. I think the main question for the market right now is how much of Russian oil will not find itself into the market. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the main question. Yeah. If everything goes, I think this market are going to look soft. We will see a bit of price pressure. If some of the Russian oil being stranded somewhere, probably a little bit more of a balance. We just don't know at this point. I think they are cautious. They're sending a word of caution by saying this, that they are aware of the downside here. Yeah. And I think that's reassuring for the market. Yeah. Nevertheless, we think that the market is a bit on the heavy side. Excess is now willingly absorbed, going into storage. Storage levels are low around the world, so there is a room to build storage. Yeah. So I don't think that there's a risk for any immediate drastic price fall.
Well, that was Gunvor Group CEO Torbjörn Törnqvist speaking to me at ADIPEC here in Abu Dhabi and talking through his, of course, the plans to purchase Lukoil's international assets, but then also his views on the market and expectation of a little bit of softness, but yet to see how those Russian sanctions play out. Okay, we're just getting some earnings come through from Toyota. We have a beat for full-year operating income, 3.4 trillion yen versus 3.2 trillion yen expectations. They're saying demand was strong despite the impact of U.S. tariffs, and they will be maintaining a policy of stable dividend increases. So a beat's coming through from Toyota. After the break, we're going to hear more from ADNOC CEO of Upstream. Good morning. This is Horizons Middle East and Africa. Our top stories this morning. The risk-off mood continues. Global stocks and futures pierce some losses after suffering their steepest slump in nearly a month on concerns of elevated valuations. Treasuries, gold, and the yen rally in a bid to safety. Historic victory. Zohran Mamdani wins the NYC mayoral race with more than 50% of the vote, according to AP. When sworn in on January the 1st, he will be the youngest person to hold the office in a century and New York's first Muslim and South Asian mayor.
New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change.
And the U.S. government shutdown continues, making it the longest in history as it enters its 36th day. It's just gone 9:30 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Johanna Bersachi in Abu Dhabi, where we are live on the trading floor of ADNOC Global Trading. Let's get you up to speed on some of these markets, though it is a risk-off day. The handover from Asia, not pretty at all. You have the likes of the Nikkei down more than 3%. The Kaabi is a similar amount, as we were just speaking about earlier on the show. Asia-Pacific MX AP down 1% as we look at the handover for the broad composite. S&P futures also trading sideways, though we did have a major pullback yesterday, namely in the tech space as well. Palantir was one of the names that saw deep losses, and that set the tone for the rest of the basket. 10-year yields at 4.07. No surprising that in this environment you are seeing some money go into flight to safety. U.S. Treasuries benefiting a little bit. We're down about 1.5 basis points. And then Brent, given so much of our discussions over the last couple of days at ADIPEC and over here on the ADNOC Global Trading Floor have been about oil and the energy complex. Today what you're seeing is energy trade sideways, just shy of $65. We're seeing a big inventory buildup in the U.S. Those numbers came through yesterday. As for our terminal chart of today, I also wanted to point out some of the price action that we're seeing in crypto. Bitcoin briefly going through $100,000 to the downside. So it's basically fully wiped out the summer rally now with this pullback, with this most recent pullback down to $100,000. As Paul Dobson, our colleague in Asia, was saying, it seems as though what we're seeing here, though, is liquidation out of long-term hands as opposed to retail being a bit flighty. So that is the reporting that we're getting from our colleagues there on what really is happening in crypto space. But interesting to note that in this massive risk-off pullback, what you are seeing is perhaps a little bit of money go into gold, but crypto, Bitcoin, not benefiting at all, down through $100,000. Well, there is a significant growth in energy demand due to emerging economies. That's according to Musabbeh Kaabi, ADNOC CEO of Upstream. I spoke to him on the sidelines of ADIPEC and began by asking him about AI in the oil and gas sector.
Well, we're executing a long-term strategy based on what we announced already, building the capacity to a 5 million barrel of oil per day. And that by itself is, of course, a major challenge. But we're committed to achieve that by end of 2027. As you highlighted, we're deploying capabilities, technologies across the board in ADNOC. We have an ambition, of course, to become the most AI-enabled energy company globally. And the AI is going to play a big role in fulfilling this vision for building capacity in the oil, but also continue expanding our gas value chain.
And your current capacity is 4.85 million.
Yes, today we have a capacity of 4.85, and as we highlighted, we're building that capacity to 5 million barrel by end of 2027.
Yeah. Could that 5 million target perhaps be revised higher because of, again, the artificial intelligence incorporation that you just highlighted, but then equally, some of the new development plans around Upper Zakum?
Our strategy is very clear. We have stated this multiple times, building capacity to 5 million. But let me highlight, building a capacity to a 5 million is going to be a challenge. Sustaining that for as long as commercially possible is going to put another challenge. So the likes of Upper Zakum and other fields, of course, Upper Zakum is going to be an integral part of our P5 or 5 million barrel capacity expansion. And it's going to play also a big role in sustaining that production for the future.
What about in unconventionals? Where do you stand in the exploration phase of potentially shale?
We are making a remarkable progress with the unconventional resources. We have recently, this year, signed with one of the best-in-class operators in the unconventional, EOG. Previously, we also announced partnership with Petronas. We are, as ADNOC, executing also a de-risking program that we announced earlier. And the results we see so far are very promising, in par or some areas exceeding what we see in the U.S. I think the story of the unconventional in the U.S. inspired a lot of people around the world. And I think the lessons learned, the technology deployment, the capabilities developed in the US and other places put us in a very strong position to capitalize on these capabilities and deliver a successful story.
Yeah, what would you say would be, are you envisaging, are going to be some of the biggest challenges in getting it up and running?
Look, when it comes to the unconventional, it is completely different game. The requirement to integrate your services, to have the right resources in place, to take the quick decisions when it comes to the unconventional is completely different than the way we used to run or we are running the conventional oil and gas business. So for the unconventional, again, let me re-emphasize that we're making the right steps. The results are very promising, and we are, embarking on first phase. Let me highlight the first phase of the gas development. We have a clear sight on developing a minimum of 300 million scf per day in the near future, based on the result we achieved so far and the cost reduction we achieved also.
Yeah, how much of a bottleneck would water supply be?
Look, the beauty of Abu Dhabi and in general the region here is similar to what you see in the US. You have an established oil and gas infrastructure. That infrastructure, you have facilities, the water, you have accessibility to water. And let's remember also, part of the oil production, there is a significant water comes with the oil. So there is also a synergy that we can repurpose, produce water to serve the unconventional. So there are a lot of ideas. How do we introduce more efficiencies in the system and create the right ecosystem that will support the development of the unconventional?
Yesterday in the opening ceremony, His Excellency Dr. Sultan was talking about the signal and the noise, and that the long-term signal is positive for energy demand, but noise, there's a bit of volatility. So let me ask you about some of that noise and how you see the oil market dynamics playing out in the next 6 months, because there is a huge part of the analyst community that are expecting a big supply glut to hit.
As you highlighted, and as the opening ceremony, Dr. Sultan was very clear, if you focus on the signal, let's talk about the signal. The long-term fundamentals of the energy sector and the energy outlook remains the same. There is a significant growth on the energy demand, driven by, of course, emerging economies, certain sectors like aviation sector or airline fleets. The number thrown yesterday or mentioned yesterday, we're moving from 25,000 to almost 50,000 airline fleets globally. Petrochemicals is going to drive demand as well. So in the long term, that demand is going to continue growing. And based on a lot of consensus, outlook consensus, by 2040 and beyond, the anticipated oil demand will remain above 100 million. That put a lot of, responsibility on an integrated producer like ADNOC. We are producing one of the lowest costs, but more importantly, one of the lowest carbon intensity barrels globally. So it is in the interest of this energy system that producers like us continue producing reliable and secure and the lowest carbon intensity barrels to the market. Power, also electricity, is going to expected to increase significantly. Data centers and power demand for data centers is expected to increase by 4x. So the picture is very clear, the signal is very clear, and the commitment on energy producers is very clear. We will maintain our strategy to continue fulfilling the growing demand for energy going forward.
That was Musabbeh Kaabi, ADNOC Upstream CEO, speaking to me at the ADIPEC conference here in Abu Dhabi. Well, coming up, Nigeria is moving ahead with a $2.3 billion Eurobond sale, even after Trump's threat rattled markets earlier this week. We'll discuss that next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Johanna Bersachi in Abu Dhabi, where we're live from the trading floor at ADNOC Global Trading. Well, Nigeria is open to selling its state-owned refineries as part of efforts to boost downstream competition. Verheijen, Nigeria's special advisor on energy, told me it's an option if they find the right partner. She also weighed in on Trump's threats to use military action against Islamist militants in Nigeria.
I think we don't really understand the complexity, and so there's a lot of education that needs to happen so that people really understand it. The president's most senior appointee in the energy sector, I'm Christian, but the president is Muslim. He's married to a Christian. A lot of members of my family, whether they're in the US or in Nigeria, we coexist peacefully as Muslims and Christians. So there's a small group of terrorists that equally attack, not really based on religion. And so it is to make sure that there is an understanding of that particular problem and that it's appropriately targeted. It's unfortunate because that level of sentiment and coming from the presidency in the U.S. means that a lot of the hard work that we've done over to reform our economy and attract capital from all sectors of the world could be in jeopardy because this is an issue that is not well understood. But we're going to take on that challenge. We've done it before. We've educated many people about the complexities of Nigeria and, more importantly, the opportunities of Nigeria. And there's a lot to learn about the way that we coexist peacefully across multiple religions.
I was going to say, as it pertains to the work that you do, and specifically in the energy industry, how important is it that the relationship is mended with the U.S. right now?
Oh, really important, yeah. So we've done a lot of work to make sure that we're attractive as an investment destination, not only to U.S. investors, but to global other investors across the globe. We're making new friends, keeping our old friends. We have Exxon, we have Chevron, who've operated in Nigeria for decades, and we hope they will be there for decades to come. And they will also be good ambassadors about the opportunities that they've realized, jobs they've created for Americans, and so that they can help us attract additional American companies from the private sector to participate in the opportunity that is Nigeria.
So let's talk about that. I believe recently you said that you're expecting $20 billion of oil and gas investment by 2029. Where is that investment expected to go?
So we've done a lot. The president has done a lot over the last 2.5 years to make sure that we improve the investment climate in Nigeria. So we've improved our fiscals to make sure it's a lot more competitive. We're now top 3. In 2024, we're considered the top 3 destination amongst 14 peer countries. A lot of those investments are going into oil, gas, and increasingly that's going to enable us power our industries, homes, businesses, make our exports more competitive. So although it's going into the upstream, so we've catalyzed about $8 billion so far in 18 months. All of those have come from international investors, big international investors in our markets. And the next 20 is also going to come from those investors and some also indigenous independents that are emerging that we've created as a result of those reforms as well. A lot of those investments are going to go into gas as well as oil. When we enable supply of gas, we are hoping to catalyze midstream, downstream that will deepen access and affordability for the Nigerian businesses, ensure that we are also able to diversify our gas exports, make sure we're not so commodity dependent, that we start to add more value to our gas and petrochemical, make sure we create petrochemicals, agricultural inputs, things like that.
So that $20 billion is essentially a tally of the commitments?
It's a tally of the commitments. There are 2 major final investment decisions that we're expecting over the next 12 months. So in oil and gas space, but it's a tallying of all of the opportunities that we see along the value chain.
That was Olu Verheijen, Nigeria's special advisor on energy. Meanwhile, Nigeria is pressing ahead with its $2.3 billion Eurobond sale, despite market jitters sparked by Donald Trump's threat of military action. The offering will test investor confidence just days after the sell-off in Nigerian assets. Our chief Africa correspondent, Jennifer Zabazaja, joins us now. Jen, really fascinating conversation that I had with the special advisor on energy there, talking through, again, some of those threats that have come through from President Trump over the course of the weekend, but then also the huge amount of reforms that Nigeria has undertaken over the last couple of years, specifically in this case, obviously in the energy sector. Interesting to see that the finance ministry has actually looked past some of the short-term noise and is deciding to come to the market with this Eurobond issuance, perhaps an affirmation of sorts of the fact that their reform strategy seems to be paying off for the international community.
Yeah, absolutely, Jumana. And that seems to be the sentiment that we're getting from a number of investors that we've spoken to. And what Olu was telling you sort of echoes what we've heard from other Nigerian officials over the past few months, really, is that finally, potentially, we're seeing some of those reforms that were quite difficult for President Tinubu to take actually yielding results. She was pointing to a few of those. We do know that fuel subsidies were costing the government a substantial amount of money, which investors were calling on the president to withdraw. He did end those. He overhauled the tax system, and he also eventually removed the previous central bank governor amid allegations, put in a new governor, Governor Cardoso, and we've seen the Naira trade more freely. And so, yes, we are finally seeing a bit of an affirmation that potentially some of these reforms are actually going to yield results. Of course, we don't know what the reception will be to this issuance right away, but the fact that just a few days after Nigeria became in the firing line of President Trump, so to speak, the fact that they're still moving on with this, their first issuance since about last year, this is a signal, I think, both by Nigeria and potentially by investors that there is some interest in these assets in Nigeria.
Yeah. How could Trump's recent threats, the recent market volatility, or I guess, at least, the pullback that we had on Monday, impact the demand and pricing for this bond sale that's going ahead this week?
Well, we were taking a look at the spread, and actually it had a minimal impact, actually, which was quite surprising for us from a Bloomberg perspective. But then if you take a look at what Bloomberg Economics has said, Yvonne Mango, who is the Africa economist, is actually asking the question whether or not we actually do see Trump follow through with some of these threats, and whether or not it will directly impact what Nigeria and what Olu was just speaking there to, which is a substantial amount of Nigeria's export revenue, which is the oil and gas sector. The violence, we should continue to reiterate, the violence for the most part is concentrated in the north of the country. There's some violence and fighting that is happening in central Nigeria, but most of the oil production is quite a ways away from any of this. But potentially, Bloomberg Economics says that if, in fact, we do see some sort of disruption to production of oil, that could potentially weaken the Naira, potentially increasing borrowing costs, and some of the stability that we've seen in the Naira could then reverse. If, in fact, we don't see any sort of direct strikes, are some of these international players who Olu was just mentioning there, but even some of the indigenous players, do they halt production? Then what does that then do to the export revenue? We should also mention, of course, we've paid quite close attention to the Dangote refinery, which has over the past year or so made Nigeria into a net exporter of oil versus being a net importer. So potentially could we see some sort of disruption just given the uncertainty and the questions around will they or won't they, or as it pertains to President Trump. But at this point in time, many people are just trying to pay attention to the facts on the ground and whether or not we'll actually see any sort of follow-on from President Trump. At this point in time, we have not heard anything.
Jennifer Zabazaja, our Chief Africa Correspondent in Johannesburg, thank you so much. Well, coming up, Abu Dhabi's AIQ is betting big on agentic AI to boost efficiency in the energy industry. That conversation next. This is Bloomberg.
Agentic AI frameworks, or the development of these agents to help support everything from upstream to downstream to other energy verticals, is a key focus for AIQ, not only within the Abu Dhabi ecosystem and not only with our key shareholder and partner ADNOC, but also exporting that knowledge and experience and those solutions to the global world. We are right now actively participating in discussions with Kazakhstan's energy giants through our strategic partner and our shareholder Presight. We're utilizing Presight's ecosystem in Southeast Asia with Malaysia, Indonesia. And of course, we want to make sure that we export that knowledge as an Abu Dhabi product.
So it's a product that you could also partner with third parties?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So this product is being developed by G42 in partnership with ADNOC, Microsoft, who are helping us develop a very sophisticated OSDU platform. So we're very honored to have strategic partners in this journey.
Yeah. You talked about the efficacy of your models earlier, and I guess one of the questions people ask is just how reliable, how accurate are the models that are coming through, and how robust is your testing system before you actually take this, you take your findings and apply it to real world applications, in the context of ADNOC and its activities?
So when you work with petabytes of data, we're first of all honored and truly, truly blessed that ADNOC have a very, very sophisticated data logs and data lakes. So the data is very clean and we are able to augment the value from it relatively quickly. We always go through a series of testings before any model is rolled out. We do it in secure environments provided by G42, which means sovereign cloud environments.
Yeah.
And we use these agents as co-pilots to date. So that means they give suggestions, they advise, they're able to support, but they are not taking the action because we want to empower the field engineers, the people who are working day to day on the fields, from the control room to the boardroom, in order to make executive decisions in a much better way.
Yeah. How important is it, do you think, for oil companies today to have intelligent energy systems in gaining a competitive edge?
It's absolutely important. As His Excellency Dr. Sultan referred to yesterday, Secretary Bergen said that power equals knowledge. And that is a very powerful statement. AIQ is front and center of that statement. We want to empower the energy providers of the globe in order to optimize their production, to increase their efficiencies, to enable them to power this global trend of the AI revolution.
Well, that was Magzhan Kenesbai, Managing Director at AIQ, and that rounds up our show for today. Horizons Middle East and Africa, thank you for tuning in every day this week.